And International Monetary Fund downgraded Nigeria's economic growth by 0.3 percentage points to 2.9% for 2023. Meanwhile, also stated that global economic growth was projected to slow from 3.5% in 2022 to 3% in 2023 and 2.9% in 2024, well below the historical average of 3.8%. Joining me now for this conversation is Kelvin Emmanuel, CEO, Dairy Hills Limited. Joining me right here in our Lagos studio, not Abuja. Great to have you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so this is quite a bleak forecast, coming from the IMF. But I'm feeling no surprises here. All the economies, global economies are going through a lot right now with inflation, and they've had to tighten rates, since 2022. So it is expected that growth will slow.
Well, to be honest with you, I'm not as optimistic as the IMF on their
So you see optimism?
Yes.
For
2024
right.
growth projection. I think in the last quarter, Q4 of 2023, the GDP growth rate is going to go up from 2.53%, so anywhere around 2.7 or 2.8%. In 2024, however, I believe that the GDP growth rate is going to add around 1% from the current position that we're in. And this is because, a sensitivity analysis was done on what the impact of the commercial refinery in Lagos is going to have on the Nigerian economy. If you check the effect of backward integration through import substitution of when transportation and non-transportation fuels, and they discovered that every 10% capacity utilization that refinery adds, you're going to have 0.1% GDP growth addition to the Nigerian growth story. So I'm not expecting that, the capacity utilization for that refinery will reach 100% by the end of 2024. I believe, for example, because if you look at GDP, it's simply a component of 4 different factors: government spending, exports, consumer spending, and investment, foreign direct investment, foreign portfolio investment. We know the growth story today. The only thing that we're seeing now is government spending. Exports are not doing so great. Consumer spending, there's demand destruction because of the regulation of PMS and energy inflation. And you can see that LPG prices is now up to 1,200 naira per kg. I expect it to go to 1,400 naira per kg before Christmas. And then you can see the investment story is hampered by the issues at the Central Bank of Nigeria, the outstanding forwards, the issues on FX swaps, and the encumbrances to the external reserves. But however, I think in 2024, you're going to see that energy inflation is going to start to slow. In Q1 of 2024, you're going to see that the inflation will peak, and you're going to see that gradually there will be like a resurgence of non-speculative foreign direct investment. NNPC will start to remit more money to the Federal Account Allocation Committee, and you're not going to see the share deficit financing in 2024 budget will reduce. The share of the budget that will come from debt will reduce a little bit. And I don't see the exports will improve, because if the refinery starts, you're going to see more exports go out of Nigeria that is not the typical crude oil and agricultural commodities. You're going to see more semi-processed and processed goods go out of Nigeria. So I'm not exactly as bearish as the IMF is and some other analysts are on the Nigerian economy. So this is why.
And the same thing with the UK government too. They weren't fond or pleased with the forecast, for the UK economy as well.
Well, the reason why Europe is going to continue to suffer, for example, is because, for good reason, they believe that in Scotland, for example, they shouldn't refine crude oil and not sea. You shouldn't, because of the whole climate change and clean energy narrative. Liz Truss, who lasted for a couple of weeks, tried it, and then she was booted out by the activists. Look, the Europe needs energy security. The inflation you see in Western Europe is mostly because of lack of energy security. The fact that the supply of gas through Nord Stream 1 was taken off, and then the supply of crude oil from Russia was taken off, and then Russia had issues with importing catalysts to maintain the refineries, to produce middle distillates like diesel, like that factories in Europe need to manufacture, and that affected inflation. The fact that going into winter months, you need gas, you need propane gas to heat up houses, to heat up plants, and for cooking gas, and that is affecting them. So the story in Western Europe, in Germany, in France is a little bit insulated because 68% of their electricity comes from nuclear energy and not thermal plants that are powered by gas. It's going to continue to be the same as far as we have the situation as it is in Russia, and the fact that Russia is having to export some agricultural commodities and fertilizer components like muriate of potash, ammonium nitrate gas through a proxy, Belarus, and then Belarus was prevented from moving these commodities to the Black Sea by Lithuania and all the other countries that are hostile to Russia and Belarus because of the occupation of Ukraine. So I don't think that if the impasse between Russia and Western Europe and the G7 is not resolved, that the energy situation in Europe is going to change anytime soon.
Right, and definitely, bringing it back here, we did see that the group CEO of the NNPCL, talking about IMF, they're pointing out that we're not getting enough, production out there to even benefit from, rising oil prices. And now we have Israel-Hamas conflict also disrupting, the oil market. So, looking at all of this, the group CEO is saying by 2024, we'll be exporting refined products. How realistic is that? And what can be done to make that a reality?
Well, the export of petroleum products in 2024 that he's talking about is definitely not going to come from the moribund Port Harcourt refinery that was finished in 1989, 210,000 barrels processing capacity. In my opinion, those refineries are dead, and the president should sell it off as scraps and stop wasting turnaround maintenance money on those refineries. They're going to come from the commercial refinery in Lagos, Dangote refinery. In terms of how you go forward, I am of the opinion that the president should commission audit on NNPC, which is going to be the first prerequisite for them to go and start doing book building to get NNPC to IPO. Because NNPC needs capital to be able to invest in projects. They need capital to invest in the midstream processing, liquefaction of gas, separation of gas, treatment of gas into propane, into isobutane, setting up a splitter plant to convert propane into butane, because Nigeria consumes more butane than it consumes propane, to reduce the cost of LPG, cooking and AC gas in Nigeria, which is a huge factor, and which also plays into the story about
because cooking gas prices are rising already.
Yes, cooking gas prices are rising. So for you to get cooking gas prices up, you have to do a conversion. It's a splitter process from propane to isobutane to reduce the amount of isobutane that is imported from Argentina, from the US, from Angola, and from Equatorial Guinea. And the interesting thing, if you can reduce the price of cooking gas in Nigeria, you can increase the adoption of cooking gas in place of firewood and reduce wood logging.
Well, we can meet our climate
and you can meet up your climate change
goals.
net zero goals. It's part of the whole energy transition program initiative. So for me, NNPC needs to raise capital. They need to go to IPO, sell equity, raise capital, fund projects like setting up midstream processing plants for LPG, fund projects like setting up high-pressure internal transmission pipes. You need a pressure transmission pipe in the southeast. You need to complete OB3, Obiaku, Obiafu, Obrekom, Oben, OB3, 127 kilometers. You need to complete AKK. The stock between Abuja and Kaduna. Kaduna and Kano is going on. Ajaokuta and Abuja is completed, 614 kilometers. They need money to complete it. And the reason why it's important is because you need to be able to deliver gas around Nigeria to even make CNG a reality as an alternative energy to decouple the impact of the regulation of PMS. So in my opinion, NNPC needs cash because it also needs to fund NMGP to export gas to get revenues to fund the budget and reduce the debt financing in the budget. So in 2024, it's important that the GC of NNPC works with the Minister of State for Petroleum, works with the Minister of Finance to audit NNPC, take NNPC to an IPO list, raise money, and fund capital projects. NLNG also needs to be funded. Train 7 is being funded. Train 8 needs to be funded. They need money to be able to commission FIDs. NNPC is holding 49% for the federal government. For you to fund it, you need anywhere between $5 and $7 billion to fund a new train, to increase the output so that you can get more dividends, get more corporate income tax, and get more withholding taxes to fund government budget. So these are the things that NNPC needs to be focused on going forward in 2024.
Before we can start exporting refined
Before we can start exporting refined products, before we can start taking advantage of gas. Gas is the key to solving the fiscal problems that Nigeria has. Qatar did $65 billion in gas revenue a year. Before, there was like an embargo on Russia, and Russia was removed from the SWIFT system of banking and Tiger II for settlements of international banking transfers, and they were excommunicated from the global and financial system. Russia was earning about $900 million a day.
From gas?
From gas, exporting gas through Sakhalin-2 to Russia, to China, from Mongolia, exporting gas to Western Europe through Poland and Germany. Russia was earning $900 million a day. So, in my opinion, I don't see the reason why we're not taking advantage of the national gas policy framework that was designed in 2017 to be able to increase the output of LNG, to be able to increase the gas pipeline infrastructure we have in Nigeria, which currently sits at about 1,800 kilometers. Nigeria needs about 10,000 kilometers of gas pipeline infrastructure. And the interesting thing is this, Ladi. For you to power Nigeria, you need electricity, on-grid electricity. You can't increase generation capacity without investing in gas pipes to the thermal plants for generating companies to increase the output of electricity.
All of this
everything is
interconnected.
Everything is interconnected. The reason why NNPC has commissioned a project to develop about 135 megawatts of generation capacity in Abuja is because AKK moved from Ajaokuta to Abuja, and they have a city gate in Gwagwalada where they are designing that plant. So Gwagwalada, that city gate is basically going to feed gas into the generating plant. For you to have Egbin increase capacity for Lagos, which currently sits below 1,000 megawatts, for a city of 20 million people, they need gas. You need to increase the amount of gas. Currently, only about 500 million standard cubic feet of gas goes through the pipes in Nigeria, which is not enough.
Right, but looking at all of these forecasts, quite gloomy. But going into 2024, how do you think, or what should we be doing now to beat these forecasts and actually do better than what the IMF is forecasting? And looking at the CBN, they have inflation to deal with, currency devaluation at this time. What should be the plan of action to change the narrative for 2024?
Well, in going forward, the reforms has to focus on, the governor needs to take out direct intervention and development finance away from the central bank and send it back all to the MDAs. The governor needs to reform the CBN Act of 2007. The governor needs to recapitalize the banks in Nigeria because of the issues on their gearing ratio, total capital over total risk-weighted assets. Their total risk-weighted assets has gone up. The governor needs to work with, advise the federal government, Minister of Finance. The Minister of Finance needs to work with, they are on the right path. Look, Tayo Wodele announced that they are decided on harmonization of the tax. They're going to reduce from 62 to less than 10. They need to increase the tax to GDP ratio to anywhere around 12 to 13%. Every 1% they add is going to add $4.4 billion in revenue to the government. They need to reduce the debt financing in 2024 from 43.8% to at least 35% and keep decoupling it down to reduce how much of debt servicing they pay and reduce the ratio of the government revenues to debt servicing ratio. In 2024, they need to allocate more money to areas that move the economy. They need to reform the educational system, give 12 to 15% to education, 12 to 15% to healthcare. You need to invest money in areas, reduce. So now you've taken off petrol subsidy, and that's 29% of it, that's 2.5%, of it that goes into paying petrol subsidy. Allocate it back to healthcare and education, areas that actually improve the lives of Nigerians and can improve the productivity and output of Nigerians to contribute to GDP growth.
Because we need to produce more going forward.
We need to produce more. And the solution, Ladi, the solution to changing the story about the real sector and manufacturing lies with inflation. And the reason it lies with inflation is because Nigeria's supply chain for manufacturing is exposed to FX. Yeah, energy and input that goes into food production. So if you're able to slow down inflation, what you do is that you slow down the increase of the MPR, and the MPR will start to come down gradually. You send back credit to the real sector, and the real sector can produce. As it stands today, a lot of companies cannot open LCs because the banks
backlogs.
basically are not able, apart from the backlogs, the banks basically cannot quote LC rate at the I&E rate. They quote it at premiums, and these companies can either not afford it or it doesn't make sense for them. So you push more people to the black market, because the banks are having to source for LC dollars at premiums that are higher than the I&E rate from companies that are bringing in FX into Nigeria.
Right.
So
much.
If you decouple inflation, you decouple interest rates, you send credit back to the real sector, you reduce the risk that banks take to lend money to the real sector, and you get the economy back on track.
Back on track. So much to unpack there, but always great having your perspective. Kelvin Emmanuel, CEO, Dairy Hills Limited. It was great having your perspective.
Thanks,
and we do hope that we're able to beat the forecast, going forward.
I think 2024 GDP growth rate is going to be anywhere around 3.4 to 3.6%.
All right. Yes. We're looking forward to that. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
All right. After the break, AFEX Commodities Market Update is next. Do stay with us.